Have you ever wondered how a single moment of miscommunication can lead to one of the most devastating maritime disasters in modern history? What happens when two vessels, each following their own protocols, find themselves on a collision course that neither could have predicted? Tonight, we're diving deep into the waters of the North Atlantic to uncover the truth behind the Antares disaster, a catastrophe that claimed dozens of lives and changed maritime safety forever. But this isn't just another tale of human error or mechanical failure. This is the story of how a perfect storm of circumstances, split-second decisions, and fatal assumptions created a tragedy that shocked the world. By the end of this investigation, you'll understand not just what happened on that fateful night, but why it happened, and more importantly, how similar disasters continue to threaten vessels across our oceans today. The answers we've uncovered will challenge everything you thought you knew about maritime safety. But first, let me tell you why this story matters so much. The Antares wasn't just any cargo ship. She was a symbol of modern engineering, equipped with the latest navigation technology and crewed by some of the most experienced mariners in the industry. If a disaster like this could happen to the Antares, it could happen to any vessel, anywhere in the world. The night of October 15th started like any other aboard the merchant vessel Antares. Captain Reynolds had commanded similar ships for over 2 decades, navigating the treacherous waters of the North Atlantic with the skill and precision that had earned him respect throughout the maritime community. His crew of 18 men had worked together for months, developing the kind of seamless coordination that only comes with time and trust. The weather conditions were challenging but not unusual for this time of year. Visibility was reduced due to heavy fog, and the seas were running at about 8 feet. Nothing that an experienced crew couldn't handle with proper caution and adherence to established protocols. At approximately 9:30 that evening, the Antares was maintaining a steady course of 215 degrees at a speed of 14 knots. She was carrying a full cargo of containerized goods bound for European ports, her holds packed with everything from electronics to automotive parts. The ship's displacement was near maximum capacity, making her handling characteristics slightly different than usual, but well within normal operational parameters. Meanwhile, approximately 12 nautical miles to the northeast, the research vessel Meridian was conducting deep-sea geological surveys. Dr. Sarah Chen, the expedition leader, had been tracking underwater formations for the past 6 days, using advanced sonar equipment to map previously uncharted sections of the ocean floor. The Meridian was smaller than the Antares, with a crew of only 9, but she was equipped with some of the most sophisticated navigation and communication equipment available. What neither crew realized was that their paths were about to intersect in the most catastrophic way possible. The fog that night was patchy and unpredictable, creating pockets of clear visibility followed by walls of impenetrable mist. Both vessels were operating under reduced visibility protocols, but the specific combination of weather conditions, ocean currents, and equipment limitations would soon prove deadly. At 10:15, the Antares radar operator detected a contact bearing 045 degrees relative at an estimated range of 6 miles. The contact appeared to be moving slowly, consistent with a vessel engaged in scientific operations or fishing activities. Following standard maritime law, Captain Reynolds ordered a slight course adjustment to port to ensure adequate passing distance. But here's where the story takes its first tragic turn. Unknown to the Antares crew, the Meridian had just deployed a deep-sea research submersible, connected to the mothership by a 3-mile cable. This operation required the research vessel to maintain a precise position and heading, severely limiting her ability to maneuver. Dr. Chen had transmitted the appropriate notices regarding their restricted maneuverability, but atmospheric conditions were interfering with radio communications throughout the region. The Meridian's crew was also tracking the approaching merchant vessel on their radar. First Officer Martinez calculated that the Antares would pass safely to starboard based on her current heading and speed. However, he was unaware of the course correction that Captain Reynolds had just ordered. This single piece of missing information would prove catastrophic. As the distance between the vessels decreased, both crews became increasingly concerned about the other ship's intentions. The fog was creating intermittent radar shadows, making it difficult to maintain consistent tracking of each other's movements. At 10:45, the Antares was now showing on the Meridian's radar at a range of just over 2 miles, but her bearing appeared to be shifting in an unexpected direction. Captain Reynolds, growing worried about the research vessel's apparently erratic movement pattern, attempted to establish radio contact. His calls went unanswered due to the Meridian's crew being focused on their delicate submersible recovery operation. The research vessel's radio operator was monitoring the underwater vehicle's status rather than the standard maritime channels. At 10:52, both vessels simultaneously realized they were on a collision course. The Antares was now less than 1 mile from the Meridian, and the fog had thickened considerably, reducing visual range to less than 200 yards. Captain Reynolds ordered hard to starboard and reduced speed to half ahead, while Dr. Chen's crew attempted an emergency maneuver despite their operational constraints. But physics and momentum were now working against both crews. The Antares, heavily loaded and traveling at significant speed, required nearly 3/4 of a mile to complete her turn. The Meridian, tethered to her submersible 3 miles below, couldn't execute the sharp course change necessary to avoid collision. The next few minutes would unfold with terrifying inevitability. Both crews could see each other's navigation lights through the fog, growing brighter and closer despite their desperate maneuvering attempts. Emergency signals blared from both vessels as they struggled to avoid the approaching catastrophe. What happened next would forever change maritime safety protocols and serve as a stark reminder of how quickly routine operations can transform into unthinkable disasters. The collision occurred at exactly 11:07, with an impact force that would be felt for miles in every direction. But the collision itself was only the beginning of the Antares disaster. The real tragedy was yet to unfold in the dark, freezing waters of the North Atlantic. The impact sent shockwaves through both vessels that could be felt in every compartment. The Antares, her massive bow striking the Meridian just aft of the research ship's bridge, created a wound that would prove fatal to both vessels. The collision occurred with such force that crew members on both ships were thrown from their feet. Equipment was torn from its mountings, and the very structure of both hulls began to fail. Captain Reynolds felt his ship shudder as the bow crumpled against the smaller research vessel. The collision alarm system activated automatically, its piercing wail echoing through the corridors as emergency lighting bathed everything in an eerie red glow. In the engine room, Chief Engineer Thompson watched in horror as pressure gauges began climbing into dangerous ranges and warning lights flashed across his control panels. Aboard the Meridian, the impact was even more devastating. Dr. Chen was thrown against a bulkhead as her vessel rolled violently to port, taking on water through the massive breach in her hull. The research ship's sophisticated electronic systems began failing one by one as seawater flooded the lower decks. Most critically, the cable connecting them to their deep-sea submersible had been severed in the collision, leaving 3 marine biologists trapped 3 miles below the surface. The Antares began listing to starboard almost immediately. Her cargo holds, packed with thousands of containers, started shifting as the ship's stability was compromised. Captain Reynolds rushed to the bridge, where his officers were already implementing emergency procedures. The damage control teams reported flooding in compartments 2 through 5, with watertight doors sealed, but water levels continuing to rise. First Officer Williams coordinated the initial damage assessment, while radio operator Johnson attempted to transmit a mayday call. The atmospheric interference that had plagued communications all evening was now preventing their distress signals from reaching coastal rescue stations. Their calls were being absorbed by the same weather conditions that had contributed to the collision in the first place. Dr. Chen's situation was deteriorating even faster. The Meridian's smaller size meant she had less reserve buoyancy to keep her afloat once flooding began. Water was pouring through the breach in her hull faster than the pumps could remove it. Her crew of 9 was now facing the terrifying reality that their vessel might not remain on the surface much longer. The research team's equipment room was completely flooded within minutes of impact. Years of scientific data and irreplaceable research samples were now submerged beneath the rising water. But material losses were the least of their concerns as the ship continued settling by the bow. Both crews initiated abandoned ship procedures, but the conditions made evacuation extremely dangerous. The fog was so thick that lifeboats launching from one vessel couldn't see the other ship, creating the risk of additional collisions between rescue craft. The 8-foot seas that had seemed manageable earlier were now life-threatening obstacles for anyone entering the water. Captain Reynolds made the difficult decision to maintain position near the sinking research vessel rather than focusing solely on his own ship's survival. Despite the Antares taking on water, she was larger and had more time before sinking became inevitable. The Meridian's crew needed immediate assistance if anyone was going to survive. The temperature of the North Atlantic water was 42 degrees Fahrenheit. Survival time for anyone entering the water without proper thermal protection was estimated at less than 30 minutes. Both crews knew that every decision made in the next few minutes would determine who lived and who died. Radio operator Johnson finally managed to establish contact with a Coast Guard station nearly 200 miles away. The rescue coordinator who answered the call immediately recognized the severity of the situation. Multiple rescue vessels and aircraft were dispatched, but the closest help was still over 4 hours away. In maritime disasters, 4 hours might as well be 4 days. The Meridian's list increased dramatically as her forward compartments filled completely with seawater. Dr. Chen ordered her crew to prepare the life rafts while she attempted one final communication with the trapped submersible crew. The underwater vehicle had its own life support systems, but with the communications cable severed, there was no way to coordinate their rescue. Chief Engineer Thompson aboard the Antares reported that his pumps were losing the battle against incoming water. The collision had caused structural damage beyond their ability to repair at sea. While the merchant vessel might stay afloat for several more hours, her fate was becoming as certain as the research ships. The fog began to lift slightly around midnight, revealing the full scope of the disaster for the first time. The Meridian was now down by the bow, with her stern rising at an increasingly steep angle. The Antares maintained a heavy list to starboard, her deck cargo of containers creating a dangerous maze for crew members trying to reach evacuation stations. Both captains knew they were running out of time. The decisions made in the next critical minutes would determine whether this maritime disaster would be remembered as a tragic accident or a complete catastrophe. The cold Atlantic waters were waiting to claim both vessels, but the fight for survival was far from over. The most challenging part of the rescue was yet to come, and the approaching dawn would reveal just how devastating this collision had truly been. The Antares disaster stands as a haunting reminder that even in our age of advanced technology and sophisticated navigation systems, the sea remains an unforgiving master. What began as routine operations for both vessels ended in tragedy that could have been prevented with clearer communication protocols and better coordination between different types of maritime operations. The investigation that followed revealed critical gaps in international maritime safety standards. The atmospheric interference that plagued radio communications that night led to mandatory redundant communication systems on all commercial vessels. The challenge of coordinating between research operations and merchant shipping resulted in new protocols for restricted maneuverability notifications. But perhaps the most important lesson from that October night is how quickly routine can become catastrophic. Both Captain Reynolds and Dr. Chen were experienced professionals following established procedures. Their crews were well trained, and their equipment was functioning properly. Yet a combination of weather conditions, operational constraints, and communication failures created a perfect storm of circumstances that proved deadly. Today, modern ships carry enhanced radar systems specifically designed to penetrate atmospheric interference. Automatic identification systems now broadcast vessel positions and operational status continuously, preventing the kind of miscommunication that doomed both the Antares and Meridian. Emergency communication protocols have been streamlined to ensure distress calls reach rescue coordinators even under the most challenging conditions. The wreckage of both vessels still lies on the ocean floor, a testament to the courage of crews who fought against impossible odds. The submersible team was eventually rescued after 18 hours underwater, but the cost of their survival was measured in the lives lost above. Maritime disasters like the Antares collision remind us that safety at sea requires constant vigilance, clear communication, and respect for the ocean's power to turn routine into tragedy in mere minutes.